The offered against fake news story draft 2018 will offer the by the government sweep powers to hit such it deems those guilty of creation or propagating counterfeit news story in prison regulation of up to 6 years and fines how could as top as $130,000. At the cardiac of the issue is a wide determination of which constitutes counterfeit news story and who an perpetrator could be. The draft defines counterfeit news story as news story, data, information, and accountable that is or are completely or partially erroneous, and an perpetrator as someone who by any tool deliberately creates, giving, publishes, prints, distributes, circulates or disseminates any counterfeit news story or publishing comprising counterfeit news story. Especially about to world print is how the offered law will as well offer the Malaysia by the government additional territorial achieve, an perpetrator requirement not be each Malaysia or in Malaysia for the law to use, as length as the counterfeit news story concerns Malaysia or a Malaysia individual. In February, in fact Law Secretary Azalina Othman told the by the government is prioritization the draft since counterfeit news story threatens domestic safety. Azalina discarded claims the law would be else instrument utilized by the authorities to fracture downward on disagreement, proverb it would defend all parties, by the government and opposition like. Legal bust yet, Zaid Ibrahim, a ex-secretary in accusation of legislative sphere, was rough in his evaluation of the draft. Inviting it helpful for the elections, Zaid told policy campaigners are already proper cautious of which they tell, although the draft hasn't been gone still. The fracas has done multiple headlines in the world print, and Zaid told Najib will use the new law to defend oneself and try all probable to put a halt to the 1MDB inquiry. We are the largest depressing nation in the planet, he told. The ex-secretary is not the just man who has go out versus the draft. Najib's own sibling, Nazir Razak, president of the CIMB banking business team, has undertaken to public print to urge for it be postponed. The Malaysia Bar Justice has as well forced how the draft be closed. In its CEO George Varugesa proverb the organization is deep uneasy by the offered law, and inviting it legal bust. Crackdown on feuilleton Varugesa told with the offered law criminalizes counterfeit news story but does not obviously determine it could be utilized to repress liberty of express. Same formulation of the provision is quite broad for an activity to be driven stimulating proper or wrong view on, for sample, economics, story, policy, scientific and religious, he told in a declaration. He added the offered law does not transactions in a position if the by the government publishes counterfeit news story. As well they run the hazard of creature detained and loaded the time they set leg in Malaysia, he added. The attorney as well pronounced severe anxiety, cartoon, spoof and feuilleton that by their really environment may engage several decoration would now be criminalized. Malaysia already has a abundance of laws how can been utilized to monitoring print and person freedoms, Varugesa told. Down there is no requirement for the act. All how the act is designed to lid is already in some law, he told. These involve the Print, Presses and Print Act 1984, the Communication and Media Act 1998, the Domestic Safety Act 1960, the Mutiny Act 1948 and the Formal Secrets Act 1972. These laws grant the by the government wide powers to, amongst some things, detention and arrest individuals out of test, categorize by the government documents, close downward publishers, and penalize erroneous news story in penal extortion. Echoes of Donald Trump card officials in Myanmar include utilized it to humiliate world scope of the Rohingya meltdown. Philippines CEO Rodrigo Duterte has thrown the period at Rappler, an on the internet news story editor and one of his staunchest critics. Cambodia's lead Hun Sen has as well utilized it to helmet print in his nation. Malaysia's draft has been marked particularly draconic by Stephen Gan, the text editor-in-chief of Visible on the internet news story website, Malaysia Kini. The website has been undertaken to trial, endangered in closing and raided by police force several times in its 18-year story. Gan says cute certainly the law is for the by the government to protect himself in the elections. It cannot claim to protect its recording, so the will halt the opposition of offensive them, he told. Of special anxiety to GAN is how the by the government could do in former part annex to the courts above estimated infringement, that tool offenders would not be this or capable to protect themselves. Same trial will just listen one party, the by the government's party. A trial procedure will be given, and if you don't get it downward, he's in further crime, he told. Thou can problem it, but if the by the government uses social procedure or domestic safety as a cause, later you include no opportunity. GAN added the prison period and enormous fines could retain whistling blowers and journalists of upcoming striker. If down there was a such law in the US in the 70s, down there would perhaps include been no Watergate.